Every day in Iowa City, I see people in passing, and I think to myself,
I wonder who that person is.
Did he grow up here?
Or did he come for college and
end up staying
because he got a grant for his research? Or maybe the love of his life?
As a townie, they
decided to raise their kids here.
In Iowa City, today I see people
every day
and wonder,
what's her story?
and wonder
What she does for a living.
I see her around.
Walking her dog.
Maybe she's the writer of that
book I loved so much.
maybe she's a dancer.
A chef.
Iowa City
Is interesting like that.
The guy sitting next to you on the bus
could be your new favorite singer. That lady who
Held the door open for you?
Could be a filmmaker.
A politician.
I see people.
I see people every day and wonder,
And wonder.
What's your story?
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 From an early age, Iowa City resident Al Murphy loved old-time and country music. The first time he touched an instrument, running his fingers down the fretboard of a broken-down one-string ukulele, he marveled at how it worked. Curiosity piqued and something clicked. When he finally got a real instrument in his hands, his natural talent took over and led him through a lifetime of making music, traveling the world with Iowa City as his home base. Now a legendary fiddler and advocate for the preservation of old-time music, Al Murphy takes his time to look back and tell some of his story. Well, Al, thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Well, you're welcome.
You're an Iowa native.
Right.
You grew up pretty near to Iowa City,
Pretty much in Iowa City.
pretty much in Iowa
Yeah.
City. Tell me a little bit about your early life.
I was born in a little town called Sibley, Iowa, northwest corner of the state. But came down here shortly thereafter. Iowa City was a great place to grow up in the 50s, late 40s. Real Mayberry kind of town, at that time. Of course, I remember all the good stuff, along the summers, picnics. And we grew up right in front of City High School. So we considered that our playground, the whole,
Those big grounds
right,
there.
yeah. Some killer hide-and-go-seek games. And movies, go downtown, walk downtown for movies on Saturday. There were like 5 movie theaters downtown at that time.
Wow.
And maybe 12 bars. Yeah, it was a great place to grow up.
And everyone knows you as a accomplished bluegrass, old time music, country musician, playing fiddle and guitar. So I think lots of people would be curious to find out whether you come from a musical family. There are a lot of musicians going back down the line in your family.
Well, there are some. It's not something I was really that aware of, when I was younger. I knew that my dad and my uncle, his brother Leo, had played in a little dance band when they were young, in the 30s. In my grandparents' attic, well, it actually was the second floor, but they used it as an attic. There were 2 old fiddles up there. And we'd be up there playing and looking at stuff, and I'd always look at those fiddles. And the hair was all out of the bows, and not set up or anything. But one of those fiddles was my uncle's, and he'd quit playing pretty much in the late 30s. And one of them had belonged to my great-grandfather. And it was one of those fancy ones with pearl inlay all over it. You used to be able to get it from a Sears catalog.
Oh, wow.
And that was my grandmother's dad, Frank Gallagher. That was his fiddle. So yeah, there was music in the background, but
Big Irish family, knowing a lot of the Irish tunes, passing them down the line, maybe.
Well, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
a few got passed on to me from my Uncle Leo, but it
So
wasn't a
music
big.
wasn't something that was really encouraged in your house?
Not really. I mean, I was crazy about music from as long as I can remember. Listening to the radio and TV. There was some country shows on TV back then that I would never miss, like the Ozark Jubilee out of Springfield, Missouri. That was a must watch for me, and so I was really into music, but I had no thought of me playing anything. That was something somebody else did,
Well, I've heard a great story about your family history, that your grandfather was, maybe it was your great-grandfather, was a pretty strict guy, and great-grandfather. He didn't want his sons playing any music, but they persevered.
Right. Two of my great uncles, Uncle Tom and Uncle John, well, they'd have been young, and they out there on the farm west of Iowa City, out by Cosgrove, in that area. They decided they wanted to play the fiddle, which would have been a big no-no, I guess. But somehow they got a hold of one, and they kept it hid out in the barn, so the old man wouldn't find it. And that worked, I guess, for a while. But they had no way to get rosin. They had no rosin for their bow. So they came up with the idea of knocking pine knots out of the barn wall to use for rosin. And after a while, the old man started seeing all these holes in the barn wall, and somehow put two and two together.
That's a pretty good deduction.
Yeah, I don't know how he ever managed that, but he found them. They were found out, and I don't know I never did ask what happened to the fiddle. So I think their fiddling days might have been short-lived.
What was the first instrument that you got into your hands with this innate love of music that you had?
Well, it's a funny thing. The first thing I picked up was this old toy plastic ukulele that we had around the house forever. It was an Arthur Godfrey ukulele. Had one string left on it. And for some reason I picked that up one day at home and sitting in the kitchen and just idly started noodling on that string. I had no idea of how to play a stringed instrument at all. I was green, I didn't even know those frets were there for a reason. And I started moving my finger up that string, and I noticed it went ding, 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 ding. This light bulb went up over my head. I thought, wow, that's how you do it. I was amazed. I never knew that. And my mother said, she could see I was kind of excited about that. She said, well, if you think you could play a guitar, we'll look for one for you. I said, yeah, I'd like to try it. So we found a little 3/4 sized German Framus guitar. A friend of hers' son had it and sold it to me cheap. And I started dinking around on that and went from there.
So did you find that you were pretty much natural on it?
Not necessarily. Like, I didn't even know what a chord was yet. I didn't know it. I was just picking it, picking melodies on it and stuff. And so, but I'd listen to Johnny Cash records, and in the background you could hear Luther Perkins on the electric guitar going bum 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 bum. I thought that was the rhythm. So I started doing that on my bass strings on the guitar to back myself up. I was doing a little singing. So I just go bum 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 bum. Didn't know what a chord was till I got a hold of a Burl Ives songbook, folk songs, and in the back was chord charts. And then on the songs where you're supposed to change, they'd have like a C and then a G and an F. So I started learning some of that. I thought, you know, that was another big revelation to me. Chords.
So you're really self-taught though.
Oh yeah.
A short foray into some other kind of work in your life, working at the University of Iowa. Besides that, you've pretty much lived a life of music.
Pretty much.
Wow. So when you were a young man, before you even got into college, were you starting to play out? Were you starting to realize, I want to play with other people, I want that full band sound?
Yeah, almost right away. After I started playing the fiddle, which is another, I didn't start playing the fiddle till, well, see, when I started playing the guitar, then my grandpa took my uncle's, Leo's fiddle down to West Music and had the repairman set it up. And then next time my uncle was in town, he lived in Davenport, he'd come over every so often. He presented it to him. Here's your fiddle, you know. And he hadn't played in 25, 30 years maybe, but he started playing right away. And I started backing him up on the guitar, so. And then he played for fiddle for 25 more years before he passed away.
Oh wow, so you guys kind of brought that back into his life for
Yeah,
him.
he might never have picked it up again.
Wow, wow. Now, when did you start playing out, like, at bars and dances and clubs and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, 15, 16.
Oh, wow. Nowadays, people would say, what's this 15-year-old doing?
Yeah, right. Well,
Doing
it
it
wasn't
here.
really legal then, but nobody paid too much attention to it, especially some of the little country taverns we were playing at, you know.
Were you mostly playing in Iowa City or in surrounding areas?
All around. Cedar Rapids, north of Cedar Rapids, in a little town called Alburnett. We'd drive clear up to Alburnett on a weekend, Friday, go back Saturday for $5 a piece and pass the hat, tips. I'm glad to get it. Just glad to be up there playing, you know. Iowa City, Quad Cities.
When you were in college, you were still playing some music, but you found that college wasn't really for you. But you got drafted pretty fast, huh?
I did.
Yeah. Into Vietnam War?
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a dumb thing to do in the 60s, you know, drop out of, you had a draft deferment.
Right. You're kind of hoping to fly under the radar.
Yeah,
there.
exactly. 1967,
Oh.
you know, but I did. And eventually one day I came home from work and my dad said, guess what you got in the mail today?
I'm sure you knew what it was.
I pretty much knew, yeah.
Yeah. So when you were deployed, did you pack an instrument? Did you bring an instrument with you?
Well, I didn't bring one with me. But after I got over there, I bought a cheap guitar. I don't know where it was made. Might have been Hong Kong or somewhere, you know. But it sounded pretty good. And a 12-string, real cheap, 20, 30 bucks maybe at the most. And played on that for quite a bit, mostly. And then I sent home for one of my fiddles, and they sent that, my folks mailed that to me. I kept that in my wall locker most of the time, in the case. And only once in a while I'd get it out. We had this Cajun guy from Louisiana. Every time he'd get happy, he'd want to hear some fiddle music, you know. So I'd go get the fiddle and play a little Jolie Blonde for him or something like that. Boy, he'd just go ape. He'd just go crazy. And so the last time I did that for him, I went to get the fiddle and I started to play on it and I realized that, whoa, the strings were about that high off the fingerboard. I said, something's wrong here. Well, the neck had pulled out of it. It was so hot over there, so hot, you know.
All the glue melted or something?
All the glue melted.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I left that there. I left all my instruments, guitar, and all my records that I had bought over there. I left all that.
So how long were you over there?
14 and a half months.
So then you came back, and were you still working in the military? Or?
No, President Johnson had this thing that if you were to extend your time over there up until the point where you had 5 months left in service, then you could get out 5 months early. So I stayed over there for 2.5 months extra, and then when I got home, I was out. I was done 5 months early. So that, you know, that was worth it to me.
Now, when you came back, was it, I mean, this was a really interesting time in U.S. history. There was a big cultural revolution going on.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on with rock
riots.
and roll music and all kinds of stuff. And when you came back, were you still interested in playing some of this old time fiddle and country music?
Oh yeah, immediately.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't miss a beat hardly. I mean, I was rusty. It was almost like starting over. But yeah, I started playing in a band. Some of the guys I'd played with when I left. Started playing right away on weekends.
Now, I know that, you know, that your introduction to music was the more old time and country and stuff. What is it about that music that you love that's caused you to play it your whole life and even kind of advocate for it, work with, you know, friends of old time music and getting, I know that you put together some, or you sit in on a lot of different circles to try to kind of help people learn that music. What is it about that music that you love?
Well, that's kind of hard to answer. It's just, it's in here, you know. I don't know. It's what drew me to it, but ever since I was a little boy, I was liking it back then. So I don't know. And I can't really say what. And that wasn't the only. I mean, some of the first records I bought were like old jazz. It wasn't just country and all kinds of folk music, you know. In the early 60s, it was a tremendous amount of music going on. But that's pretty much what I stayed. I mean, I never played jazz or anything, but I enjoyed hearing it, you know. When I was in junior high, I went down to the Union, Iowa Memorial Union, to hear Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, wow.
About 57.
You got to see Ella Fitzgerald at the Union?
In 1957. I put on my white leather sweater without a letter and my white bucks and went down there to buy a ticket. And the guy said, "Boy, I'm sorry, but we're all sold out." So there I am. But hang around, we might have an opening. So I hung around. Pretty soon the usher came and got me and said, you know, "Follow me, kid." And took me to an empty seat, and there was a guy sitting there next to it, and he said, "This is your benefactor." I didn't know what benefactor meant. So I just sat down. I didn't even say thank you or anything, you know. So basically, I guess I got in free. Guy had an extra ticket. And
You just said, "Hey, is there somebody in the lobby that was?"
yeah, I didn't benefactor.
I know you've got so many stories to tell.
I really do. A lot of them couldn't be told here.
Well, you've handpicked them for us
Right.
today.
Mm-hmm.
You've lived this whole lifetime of music, and you've played with so many phenomenal musicians. Well, let's talk a little bit about your life on the road. You did a lot of traveling
Quite a
in
bit.
your life. Who are some of the musicians that you've played with over the years?
Well, the one that comes to mind first of all is one of my big hero fiddle players, Kenny Baker, who was Bill Monroe's main fiddle player for over 20, 25 years at least. And after he quit playing with Bill Monroe, he went on tour and he used myself and Bob Black and eventually Alita as his backup band. So we did that for like a season, and that was big. That was big time.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that your wife Alita is an accomplished musician herself,
Right.
and you two have played music together consistently over the years for many years. What's that like? You know, going into a life of music and having your partner right there with you?
Well, it's great. It can be a little dicey. But yeah, it's good. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Sometimes, we can just little jobs, just the two of us, a lot of times. We're doing a birthday party coming up for a 90-year-old lady. Just be just the two of us. And she knows all my music and can follow anything I play.
And do you two ever since you're playing out professionally all the time, would a typical night at home for you two ever be, hey, let's just sit down and jam a little bit, or are you over that at this point?
Not as much as we used to, maybe. If we got a show coming up, we'll maybe practice,
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe not as many kitchen jams as we used to have, but we still have big jams here,
What would you say to some of these musicians here in Iowa City and around that are thinking, I'd really like to make a life in music? What would you say to these folks?
Well, I'd say go for it. On the other hand, it wouldn't hurt to have a little something to back you up, something besides music, which I didn't really ever have. But and this day and age, things are so computerized and everything, and it would be good to get a little savvy on the business end of it, which I never got too savvy on that either. Those are some things I would recommend if you're thinking about playing music full time.
Well, Al, thanks so much for sitting down with me
Well,
here
thank
today.
you. I'm finding it easy to mind my own business. I'm keeping my nose out of everyone's way. I ain't taking no orders, I ain't hiring no people, just taking it easy. It's my lazy day. I ain't asking no questions, I ain't giving advices, I ain't dating no women, I ain't a wanting to play. I'm gonna look stupid, I don't wanna meet Cupid, just taking it easy. It's my lazy day. Just taking it easy, it's my lazy day.
Community voice.
Nobody see black and gold and we roll on our enemies. If you living in the city, you know what I mean. You live in New York, nah man, I see. Iowa City is the city where nobody see black and gold and we roll on our enemies. If you living in the city, you know what I mean. You live in New York, nah